Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
This is what happened yesterday. Everything was set and then gone. All right, guys.
It will be good this time.
I'm hoping.
Just for information, Priscilla, Jerome and John left me.
Okay.
It's better maybe if Nicola and Francesco are alone also. It's really better that.
Okay, that's no problem.
It's fine for you.
And maybe they tune in and watch.
They will.
Okay, great. So you guys ready?
Yeah, ready, yes.
I believe we are live. So, hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Priscilla Sarnau. I do the marketing and communications for Venture. And welcome to the introduction of our health and nutrition winners. So with me today, I have Luca from Next Kidney, Nicola from NeuroSoft, and Francesco from Aradia, who will be presenting themselves via an elevator pitch, a quick introductions on themselves and what they do. And then you get to listen to what made them a Venture winner today. So I would like to start off with Nicola from NeuroSoft. If you can please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Priscilla. So my name is Nicholas, and I'm a co-founder of NeuroSoft Electronics. So the mission of our medical device startup that is a spin-off from EPFL is to develop the next generation of soft implantable electrodes to interface with the nervous system in order to help patients suffering from neurological disorders. So what we're doing is really developing implantable medical devices that can be used to record from or stimulate the brain, spinal cord, or peripheral nerves in order to monitor, for example, patients who suffer from epilepsy or to provide treatment for patients who suffer from blindness or deafness. And what is unique about us is that instead of using rigid metal discs that are currently used in the clinic to stimulate or record the brain and spinal cord, this is really not ideal because if you think about it, your brain and spine are made of these extremely soft tissues. So we have come up with a platform technology that allows us to manufacture these extremely soft and stretchable electrodes that can really conform to the curvature of the brain and spine and actually access locations of the brain and spinal cord that are simply not possible with rigid devices. And you really need this flexibility to access these regions. So for example, if you want to provide therapies for blind people or deaf people, you need to access this auditory cortex, visual cortex that are hard to access because they're inside the sulci on the brain. And so having flexible electrodes, soft electrodes that can go there is really critical to be able to provide therapies for these patients. So this is a very ambitious goal. And today our first device is actually more a de-risking device that we want to use intraoperatively. So during brain surgery, where we can use these electrodes to stimulate and record from the surface of the brain. So typically this is used by neurosurgeons to allow them to map the brain surface during when they remove brain tumors or when they remove parts of the brain that cause epilepsies. So this is our very first step towards this ambitious, more complex applications later on. And really our goal as a company in the long term is to replace the way we interface with the nervous system using our electrodes to help patients. Voila.
Great. So thank you very much for that introduction. I see that you brought the actual product with you.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how long it took you to develop that?
So it's a good question. So actually it's from research in academia at EPFL that we've been working on these technologies, and it's been more than 8 years actually. So of development, we started with less complex systems, and we built up to this point where we can actually make devices more reliably. And we did it first for research, and now we're going towards clinical devices, which also takes a lot of time. So 8 years, yeah, for now.
That's quite quite some time. You mentioned that some of the applications that you could use this with was to help with blindness and with deafness. Is there what other applications do you see in the short term, long term?
Yeah.
For
So
this
short
product?
term, we really want to target epilepsy. It's a nice use case because these devices are used for a few weeks to typically find out where the epilepsy comes from. So from a regulatory perspective, it's much easier to get these devices approved for short-term use in the body. So for usually less than 30 days. So I think this is really the first step. And then going into more complex, yeah, we're thinking of deafness. We're also thinking of tinnitus, which is another disease in the auditory system. So these are some of the applications we're thinking about more in the mid to long term.
Okay, and so I just wanted to let the audience know that you can ask questions if you would like. That's why we're here, and we'll be happy to address any of your questions. So please feel free to type them in as we keep the conversation going. Now, you mentioned epilepsy. There's already medication for people who suffer from epilepsy. How would it be different as a solution?
All right, an excellent question. So actually, we want to target what we call drug-resistant epilepsy. So from reviews, we've seen that about 1/3 of patients do not respond to drug treatment. So unfortunately, a lot of them still undergo a lot of drug treatments. They try combinations for 10, 20 years, even though we know that's not going to give anything. So the idea is that it's been shown in multiple studies that for these patients who do not respond to drug treatment, the best course of action, even though it looks very severe, but it's actually to remove the part of the brain that causes a seizure. And so typically it's for these patients who do not respond to drugs, they go into these surgeries where you remove the part of the brain. And the challenge here, and this is why you need these electrodes, is that either you don't know where the seizure comes from, so you need to use the electrodes to monitor the epileptic seizures for a few weeks. And once you know where you are in the surgery, at the moment as you remove the part of the brain that causes the seizure, you want to make sure that you removed all the pathological tissue. And so these electrodes can be used during the surgery to make sure that you removed everything. Because what you want to avoid is doing brain surgery, close up, and the patient wakes up and he has seizures again, and you have to undergo a second surgery. So these electrodes are a good way to make sure everything went fine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That sounds like a very, very helpful solution. I have a question from the audience. How are you going to convince surgeons to use your electrodes?
That's a very good question. So, well, we've been talking a lot to neurosurgeons around Europe and in the US. And today, they're actually quite excited to have electrodes that are a bit softer so that it can actually conform to the curvature of the brain. So in the context of epilepsy, this is important typically when you have big cavities that you create because you're removing tissue. If you have a rigid device, it doesn't conform very well. So it's actually a bit nicer to use. And also, this is not the case on this device here, but we can make electrodes that are much smaller and closer to each other. And so in some contexts, this can be extremely useful. Sometimes it's not useful, but sometimes it allows you to be a bit more precise. And so these are the type of features that we think could convince doctors to use our devices. But more from a clinical perspective, our goal is really to do clinical studies and to demonstrate the performance of our device. First, to get FDA and CE mark, but afterwards to demonstrate performance that is better than current electrodes. So we hope that clinical data would convince surgeons to use our electrodes ultimately.
Yeah, well, that's definitely one big step to take, of course, to convincing the surgeons. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you very, very much, Nicolas, for introducing NeuroSoft and the amazing work that you're doing there. And then I would like to now invite Luca from Next Kidney to introduce what they're doing at Next Kidney.
Yes, for sure. So first, thank you, Priscilla, for the introduction, and Nicolas for this interesting presentation of NeuroSoft.
Okay.
So I'm Luca. I'm the business development manager at Next Kidney, and so maybe I will explain a bit for the audience that do not know about ESRD, so end-stage renal disease. So maybe let me explain you why our hemodialysis device, the Neo Kidney, is a real evolution for the people suffering from end-stage renal disease. In short, ESRD. So ESRD means that the main functions of the kidneys have become non-functional and need to be replaced to avoid a certain death. So just today, about 88.5% of the people with ESRD are on hemodialysis and can continue to survive. So yes, I mean, I said survive and not live, and maybe I will explain you why I said that. So let me maybe imagine now that you have to go 3 times a week during 4 hours at fixed time to hospital for your treatment, not counting the transport time or the hangover that you will have the next day because of your treatment. And all of this leaves very little time for the rest of your social life. So it's true today, today and nowadays the new machines make it, there is new machines on the market make it possible to take the patients home, but it's only for a very small group and it's only under complex conditions. So maybe imagine now that you should have an entire room dedicated to your machine and your treatment, that your children are afraid of entering this lab-like room and your spouse running around to support you. So your life will be around the treatment. It's not the treatment it's not your life that is around the treatment. So it's better than the hospital, but it's not really yet a life of freedom and autonomy. So maybe why did I take you, I will explain you why I take my time to tell you, half of my time to tell you about these problems the patients faced on. Because if now I tell you that all these problems will be eliminated thanks to the new kidney, can you also imagine all the real advantages our solution will provide? So our machine, the new kidney, is a lightweight, portable, and cost-effective solution. It's carry-on luggage style. So if you want to travel, it has a very small footprint, and above all, it can be plug and play anywhere at any time. So the treatment will finally start to adapt to your life, and not the opposite. And all this together will allow getting back a social and professional life closer to normality for these people. So yes, that's why at Next Kidney, our vision is to offer this life instead of survival to people suffering from ESRD, so end-stage renal disease. So,
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for your explanation. Now, this seems like you can have a huge impact on the quality of life that these patients currently have. Can you just remind me how long are the treatments currently in the hospital versus what they could be with Next Kidney?
Sure. Today in the standard treatment in hospital, it's 4 hours, 3 times per week. That means that you need to go 4 hours in a hospital environment at fixed schedule, because you cannot go when you want. So you need to go at certain times. So your life is around your treatment. With our solution and with the home hemodialysis, which is a new modality of treatment, it's 2 hours, 6 times per week. So yes, it's more, but less time, less in time. And the main advantage, I think, it's that you can do it when you want. So I have a patient told us that, for instance, she do her treatment early in the morning. She can then work all the day and do maybe another one at the end of the day, very lately. It's depending. She or he can do their treatment when they want, and that's very, very an important step for their freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're giving them the freedom to lead their lives the way they want and not be restricted to the hospital or to a chair for many hours. Now, how is it that you can do this shorter treatments more frequently than in the hospitals?
Maybe I didn't really understand your question.
Sure. How come in the hospital it's longer, but less time, and then with your product you have a shorter time, but you do it more frequently? What's in your product that makes it so?
It's so at the end we do the same level of hours, the same time of hours during the week. The difference is that at the hospital you do that only 3 times per week, so you need to do that rapidly. So your flow is more rapid. So you have how to say, a dialysate flow that is not very physiological for the patient. And that's why also the people which are doing these treatments in the hospital, then during the afternoon or after the treatment, they feel very bad and they have this hangover feeling. We are providing a treatment that is very more physiological. So the flow rate is less rapid. So it's more, it's more nearly that, more, I have to say that it's near the function the renal function, the normal renal function. That's why the people can feel better. And why we can do that, and when you can do that more often, is also thanks to our innovative sorbent technology that allow to reuse this dialysate flow. And that's also, I didn't enter in the detail during the presentation, but one of the main advantage that we have compared to the hospital ones and the other machines that are on home market is that we are using less fluids. So the fluid is the dialysate that allow to remove the toxin from the blood of the patients. So thanks to the sorbent, it's recirculate, and you don't need to use 25 to 30 liters as it is for the home machines, of the 2-day home machine, but we only use 5 to 6 liters. That's why you don't need a dedicated room for the storage space. I'm going a bit in different direction, but to give you a bit more the context of.
I have one additional question from the audience. It says, in a hospital, you have an ICU setup in case of any complications during dialysis. How do you address that with a home setup?
Excuse me, it's.
Sorry. It says in a hospital, you have an ICU setup in case of any complications for dialysis. So how do you address this in a home setup?
So there is different supports. Thanks to our machine, you will have a direct connection with an HCP or a healthcare professional in case of emergency. You will have a how to say that support line that you can contact at any time if in any case. And also it depends on the country, but in some countries it is a case, for instance, in France, it's mandatory to have a caregiver that is here at home for your treatments. It's not always the case, but it can be. So it's also an additional support that can help the patient in case of emergency.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Luca. This was very insightful. I think you guys are really onto something to change the quality of life for many, many people who are affected by this disease. So I wish you also the best of luck.
Thank you very much, Priscilla.
And now I would like to invite Francesco from Aradia to please introduce himself and his project.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. It was very nice to meet the other two startups, so I thank them all. And I'm Francesco Clavica. I'm the CEO of Aradia. We provide the first and only non-invasive solution for urinary retention. Several million people all over the world are suffering from urinary retention every day. These patients are unable to urinate properly because of either a weak bladder muscle or an enlarged prostate. This condition is more prevalent among men. It worsens with age. It leads to incomplete bladder emptying, which requires frequent visits to the bathroom, causing embarrassment, reduced self-esteem, and continuous sleep disruptions. Unfortunately, there are no non-invasive solutions for these patients. And besides surgical treatments, today's approach is based on catheters. But we all know that catheters are associated to a very high degree of discomfort, bleeding, pain, also sense of humiliation, and last but not least, urinary tract infections. All patients using catheters come back to the hospital approximately every 5 months because of a severe urinary tract infection. So Aradia provides for these patients the first and only non-invasive device which can help them to empty completely their bladder. After conducting a proof of concept studies in our labs, we will start our first in-man clinical study later this year. Our first product is for men, but we have also a solution that is similar for women in the pipeline. Our Aradia device helps these patients to completely empty their bladder. It is not invasive, totally external, and it eliminates the risk of urinary tract infection. It is handheld and discreet, as it can be taken out only when needed. It is also small enough that can be carried in a pocket or in a small bag. So with the Aradia, our patients will improve their quality of life and regain their self-esteem. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Francesco. So this is really interesting because I think this is a problem that affects a lot of people. Can you remind me of the first figure that you mentioned at the beginning? How many millions of people does this affect?
So if you consider only the DACH countries, so Austria, Germany, Switzerland, we are talking about 11 million men suffering from this disease. So it's a huge, huge prevalence.
Yeah.
And also this prevalence will increase because of the aging population and also because of the increased awareness about urological disorders, because patients now are checking online about their symptoms and they can associate.
Now, is there a certain age usually that men are affected by this, or this can affect anyone at any time?
So as I say, there are two problems, one affecting the bladder muscles, and this affects more or less patients of all the ages. But regarding the prostate enlargement affects mainly older men. So we talk about older than 50 or 60s. And if men live long enough, actually the prostate is an organ that keeps growing. So one day there will be the problem for everyone.
Okay, so I mean, this seems like this is a very large, widespread issue. And so I'm surprised to hear that there are no other solutions that are non-invasive, or do you know of any other, maybe they're not official, maybe some kind of competitors that you are looking at in the same space?
Actually, we were surprised as well in the beginning when we started looking, when we had the idea. And as I say, like the main, the really effective solution are catheters, but they are very invasive. Also, there are some products that are based on sacral neuromodulation, but they need to be implanted. So there is a migration of the device, infections again. And our product is, as I say, like totally external. The patient's also in his pocket, and when he's in the toilet, also in the public toilet, can take it out and use to empty completely the bladder.
Okay. I just wanted to remind the audience, everyone who's tuning in, you are free to ask questions to Francesco while we're in conversation. So in this this product, you have no contact with urine whatsoever, or you do, or how does it work?
So there is no contact at all with urine. That's the main advantage.
Okay, so you clean hands all the way.
Yes, exactly.
Good. And then how do you plan to market this product? Is this a direct to consumer, or are you planning to go through urologists or hospitals? What's your go-to-market?
For sure, like urologists will be the prescribers of our product. So we need to address the urologist first. And of course, then in order to get in touch with the urologist, we will need to establish partnerships with the sales representatives and also country affiliations. It's also very important for us to have a strategy for reimbursement. So we are working also on this because particularly Europe, we have to deal with every single country. This is our next step.
So your first, I guess, a target market would be the DACH countries, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We have a question. Are there any risks for people using it by themselves? Could they potentially get an infection or use it improperly and hurt themselves?
Well, we hope not, and this is why we are starting our clinical study soon. But according to our design, we don't think that will be serious problem for the patient because it's very simple. It's just something that is small and can be used only when the patient needs to urinate.
Okay, if I understand correctly, it's almost like an external pump.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I would like to ask all of the winners a question. And that would be, if you won the venture, the grand prize of venture, because you're all winners today, we find out what your ranking, first, second, or third place will be on June 22nd during our award ceremony. But we also have the prize of the grand prize winner, who wins 150,000 francs. What would that mean to you, and what would you do with this money? So I would like to start off with Nicola, if you could provide us with your answer.
Yeah, no, thanks. So of course, I would be very honored if you can win this first prize. So for us, it's about being able to do two things. The first one is more on the business development aspect. We want to be able to clarify some of the strategy to enter the market in the US especially, and to pay some consultants so we can work on reimbursement, pricing. And so this will be extremely helpful to really have a nice business case. And we also want to use some of this money to develop some more complex prototypes of other ideas that we have for our devices that we want to use in the clinic as a second step. And being able to run some preclinical quick studies with that kind of money would be extremely helpful to basically de-risk at the early stage devices and these new applications. So I would say development of new products and business development, that would be the main use of the funds.
Great, thank you very much, Nicola. And Luca, what are your thoughts?
So yes, as Nicola said, we will be also very honored to win this first prize. And I think if we resume in 2 points, it will be maybe the first, the financing the clinical plan. I mean, no, we need to have. We are in this last phase of development, and it's important for us now that we have to do clinical trials, and it will be it will allow us to prepare this clinical plan. It's, I think, one of the main points. And the second point is increase also the awareness and of our company in Europe, and mainly in Switzerland. We already have and to do some partnerships. So we already have partnerships, and we are known in Netherlands, as we are partnering with the Dutch Kidney Foundation, and we would like also to have this same on the Switzerland side, and that will allow us to do this awareness effort.
Yes, thank you very much, Luca. Yeah. And I would like to ask the same question to Francesco.
Yeah, for sure, will be very handy to have this money, and also will be very honored to get in case. Probably we will first celebrate, because this is a big achievement for our startups, but the rest will be used for investment in the team. In fact, probably we will use for short-term salaries, because we need to expand our team. So there will be a good start to start hiring new people.
Good, thank you. So I would like to say a big thank you to you three for being here with us this morning, and for telling us a little bit about what you do and how you are making great strides in your different areas and industries. So a big congratulations as well for coming this far in the competition. And I look forward to seeing you, and for those of you tuning in, on June 22nd at 6:30 p.m. we will be live streaming our award ceremony, which will be online, and you can tune in on Facebook Live here, June 22nd, 6:30, don't forget. So thank you guys very much, and best of luck.
Thank you
Thank you very much
for leading this live, and thank you to the audience.
Yeah,
thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.